Hi everyone, today I want to talk about how long it takes to get published. I'm going to break down the time frame that it will take to write your book, edit it, and take it through the publishing process with a traditional publisher. If you've never watched any of my videos before, my name is Louisa. I'm an author, I'm a teacher. I coach memoir writers specifically on how to take a story from rough draft to publication ready in months, not years, via my signature program, which is called The Art of Memoir. I've also written 2 books myself, both traditionally published, and they were both memoirs as well. I am always learning more about memoir and publishing, and it's my goal with all of my teaching and everything that I do to empower authors, particularly first-time authors in the traditional book publishing industry. So this is why I wanted to talk about timelines, because I know that I was always really curious before I had my first book, Love and Other U-Turns, published. I was always really curious about how long to expect around the drafting, the revising, the editing, and all of that. So I read this Substack from author Natasha Lester, where she was talking about her own process and how long it took her. And I thought, oh, well, actually, that is exactly how long it took me to write and edit my book. So I thought I'll just take you through exactly how long it took me. So with my first book, a travel memoir, Love and Other U-Turns, from the drafting process, so obviously we all know that we don't send off our first draft to a publisher, particularly if it's your first ever book. But I did that. Yeah, I did that. And it was not a good idea. But anyway, I learned a complete strategy to take it up to publication standard through these structural layers that I now teach in The Art of Memoir. And that revision process, which actually was almost like writing the whole book from scratch because of how much I needed to change. I remember starting that in about April of, it was 2008. And then I think I completed it by July or August. I had a break from it. I sent it to my beta reader before I sent it to the agent that I had at the time. Now, this had, as I said before, I had done an original draft, which was very different the year before. If I put all of those months together of the writing and rewriting process with breaks, it would be about a year, about less than a year. So even if your first draft takes you 3 months, 90 days, which is what I promise in my program, The Art of Memoir, I have a whole blueprint for how to do this. You will need to then revise it and take it through a few sweeps of revision. So that's what I also teach in the manuscript finishing school piece. And you will also need to leave it for a week or 2 or even a little bit longer at a certain stage when you've done a couple of drafts. It always benefits from leaving it. So I would say a year for the writing process completely, okay? Because you are going to need to revise it, even though your first draft can be done in months. And I recommend that. I recommend getting that first draft done as quickly as possible so you can stay in the flow of the story, so you can get out what needs to come out and actually see what the real story is that you are writing. Because this is a big problem that I see with memoir particularly, and I've experienced this myself. You think you have an idea of what you're writing and what the story is, but it's not until you have that first draft out on the page, when you've written it in a certain way, that you realize there was actually something a bit deeper going on there, and the story that needs to be told is slightly different, sometimes completely different to what you thought it was. And this is all the whole magic and part of the whole self-development part of the memoir writing process particularly. No other writing genre is as transformational on a personal level, because if you're writing a fiction book, it's not your personal experience. You're not going back into your memories. You're not re-scripting and rewiring these particular experiences. So it doesn't work the same way on an unconscious and a subconscious and a conscious level. So the reason that you need a timely and relevant hook to sell your memoir to a traditional book publisher is because once you sign that deal, as I did with Love and Other U-Turns, that book could be out in shops in as little as under a year. So if your hook, if you're working on your book for 10 years or 5 years, by the time that you start pitching it, the story might no longer be relevant. We already know how much life is changing at the moment on a global level, on a political level, on a cultural and societal level. So I really recommend that if you have a strong story idea and you want to get your memoir published, you write the draft as quickly as possible. That's as simply as I can put it. And this is why I do recommend and I teach you how to get that draft process done in months, not years, and not taking massive breaks, because the story will change, society will change, and it will no longer be relevant. There's so much to do with hooks and premises that need to be connected to the time you are pitching it and selling it. It's also why I teach the query process and the platform and the pitching process inside the art of memoir, because you need to actually have that overview, that understanding of how the publishing process works in terms of what they buy and how it is all sold and marketed. And in nonfiction, general nonfiction and memoir and narrative nonfiction are sold according to trends, timely hooks, relevance of both the author and the topics and themes. And there needs to be a connection there with what general society is going through. Otherwise, no one will be interested in reading it. It won't have that compelling hook. It won't be important to more than just you, if you understand what I mean. So this is, again, why I just wanted to really clarify why I do teach that you need to write your book in months, not years, because you don't want to lose the relevance and the interest and your own interest in the story. I know that when I leave things too long, and I also take big breaks and don't come back to things, I lose my enthusiasm for the project too. So a year for the drafting process before you can submit it. And that is with a few different drafts. Now, people have also asked me how many drafts I've done of my books, and it's very hard to tell you. So with A Letter from Paris, I'll give you a different example. And I chronicled all of this and I teach exactly what I did to take that up to publication standard. What I did was, so I had all the research. This is not a straight memoir. It's also a biography. It also contains a lot of history. So there was an enormous amount of research that I needed to compile before I could sit down to the writing. So I would say that I had done the research the previous year, and up until March, I'd been to 7 different libraries, interstate, overseas. I was accessing different collections. There was an enormous amount of material that I needed to work through. And then I sat down to do the writing. I believe it was the 1st of May. I took a photo of my word count, and then I finished the rough draft. Oh, it was a rough draft. May to June, June to July. I think it was August. So it was less than 90 days. I think I had a week or maybe slightly less than a week's break before I got back into it, because I was under a deadline, and I also, again, I didn't want to lose the thread of the story, and I had too many ideas that I needed. You know, when you're in this world of a story, it's like it's working in your unconscious even when you're not working on it. And I had that break and I had really nice reward, but then I got back to it and I saw it in a whole new light and I was able to improve it so much more. So I probably took it through 2 more drafts before I then sent it to the publishers. So that's about three drafts. But you know, how do you say it's 3 drafts when I might have reworked a particular chapter 6 or 10 times? You know, so it's hard to say, but I will say that it's a year. It's good to give yourself a year for the writing of a book. And that includes all the drafts and revisions. And then editing. So editing with the publisher, I would say, and this is if you have a book deal already. This is not counting any of the pitching and the querying and the proposal process, because that is impossible for me to tell you how long that is going to take you. But in terms of the editing from the publishers, I'll tell you that with my first book, Love and Other U-Turns, from the date that I signed the book deal with Allen and Unwin, which was in September, it was then published in June the 1st the following year. So that was considered enormously quick. So that was less than a year. And we went through, I think we only actually went through 2 editing sweeps. It didn't need a developmental edit, which was great because I had done so much work to bring it As I said before, I've pretty much rewritten the whole thing from scratch after a terrible rejection from a publisher, which you can learn about in a different video, which actually showed me a lot about what I needed to include in the story. So I signed the contract in September and it was published on June the 1st the following year. Now, I am told by publishers and agents that that is enormously quick. But that was, again, because the publisher, not just the editor, the commissioning editor, the publisher I was dealing with directly, had seen the state of the manuscript. She'd read it all and she knew that it wouldn't need developmental work. I think some books take longer because they do require a lot of developmental work from different editors. So with A Letter from Paris, I sent them the draft it was either September or October. And then we went through, first we had a meeting in November where I was just given some ideas and suggestions. It wasn't like a full, page by page edit. It was just some suggestions which were enormously helpful. And we had this meeting face to face. This was part of the reason I chose Scribe to publish this. Not a big five. I wanted to be in the same city so that I could meet and learn from my editor. He gave me actually a visual map of the rise and fall of the narrative, and I found that really, really helpful. So I went back and redrafted, and then we went through a more detailed edit, and then that was a more detailed one where it was like, okay, can we maybe remove or rework this character, or can we shorten these chapters, or more sort of detailed areas. And then there was also a proofread, which you'll always have, or copy edit. And that is when you can't make changes there in terms of you can't suddenly add 10 pages to a chapter. So that's really important to know, is when you do get a book commissioned by a traditional book publisher, you need to be aware that you will need to put time aside to do these revisions. So yes, you might have worked through the manuscript and reworked it a number of times, like I had with Love and Other U-Turns, but I still needed to set aside, I think it was 2 weeks, as soon as I got that structural edit, which is sort of the big edit that you get, the main one, and really work with my editor's notes and just submerge myself in it so that I could get it back to her and not stuff up the whole publishing timeline. And so, the work is not done when you send the manuscript to your publisher. So I do remember as well with A Letter from Paris that it was January or February of 2018, and 2018 was the year that this was to be published in September. So I had sent them the draft in September 2017, and I think it was February that I received structural edits, which needed me to just put my head down and really, really focus on the story. And I remember asking my partner to move out for a couple of weeks because I just put everything on the floor. It's very physical, the editing process, particularly at that stage. One of the reasons this is so important that you put aside time in that year that you're working with your publisher is because you can't then, when it gets to the proofreading or the copy editing stage, you can't then start adding characters or adding, a whole page to a chapter. It is getting to the typeset stage where changes to the pagination and the page numbers is really going to affect so many people in the business. So it's important to make sure that if you've signed a publishing deal, you're working with a traditional publisher, you understand that the work is not over and you will need to do more revisions and edits, and you will need to put your head down and bring it and, not just make it really quick and agree to everything that they say. You will need to actually put your thoughts and your new material in there as well, because some of the edits and suggestions from my editor I didn't agree with, and I had to consider, okay, why don't I agree with this? What do I want to actually put instead? Because I could see his point about part of it, and that, that's deep work. It's not something you can just do over a weekend. So this is a big thing that I see with first-time authors is they go out celebrating when they've signed the publishing deal, and then they get a huge shock when there's still work to be done that they need to take time off for. So a year for the drafting and revision to get it up to that submission standard. And this is what I teach you and take you through in The Art of Memoir. And then a year that you will, I would say a year, even though it was slightly less for my first memoir, it is on average, it is a year of working with your publisher through their various editing and copy editing stages. And you'll also be talking to marketing and getting the whole publicity campaign ready with them before it comes out. So that's 2 years minimum. Now, I haven't mentioned any of the pitching or querying process because that is separate, okay? So you could, like I did with A Letter from Paris, you could sign the deal through a query and a synopsis before you've written the book, or as happened with Love and Other U-Turns, you could send the query, get a request for full manuscript. The publisher read it over the weekend. I had the manuscript ready. So important, particularly I think when it's your first book, to have as much polished material ready as possible. And that all happened within a week. I sent the pitch on Friday. It was actually called the Friday pitch, what I sent it to. And I had a verbal offer of a book deal by the Tuesday. So it can happen that fast, okay? It's all about the pitch though. I'm not talking about the pitch in this video. So a year for writing and revising and bringing it up to what it's supposed to be before you submit it. And then a year that you'll be working with your publisher before the book comes out. So yeah, I guess that is slow, and it's also why traditional publishing, I believe that it is a higher standard because you have more quality vetting and more people going through the manuscript, and it is a much higher standard. I teach you the writing, revision, and publication process in The Art of Memoir. I teach you how to pitch it, write the proposal, the synopsis, the query, whatever sales documents you need to sell your memoir to a traditional publisher in The Art of Memoir. If you would like the whole step-by-step process for how to write your draft and bring it up to publication standard in an empowered state because you've developed so much in the process, I take you through all of it inside The Art of Memoir, my signature program. So you can learn more about that below.